All right, welcome everybody. We are back for our second consequentialist moral theory, utilitarianism. We will be covering both act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism today. But before we do that, I wanted to, just like when we did ethical egoism, I kind of introduced you to psychological egoism before that as the underpinning of human nature. So that we then build a moral theory on and see how well it operates. Today I'm going to do basically the same thing. What's going on here? So in the same way, I want us to have a look at it. Jeremy Bentham, who was the founder and father of utilitarianism, had this to say. Nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out what we ought to do, as well as to determine what we shall do. On the one hand, the standard of right and wrong. On the other, the chain of causes and effects are fastened to their throne. They govern us in all we do and all we say and all we think. Every effort we can make to throw off our subjection will serve but to demonstrate and confirm it. Now, what was he talking about? I'd urge you to pause it and go through it and try to put it together in your own words. The best way to learn something is to struggle through it. But because we're all short on time, aren't we? What he's saying, as far as I can read it, is this. Pain and pleasure control everything we do. They are the chain that controls right and wrong, as well as good and bad, and causes and effects. They govern everything we do. Every effort we make to throw off our subjection, to say, I'm not beholden to pain and pleasure, I do things for my own reasons, will only serve to demonstrate and confirm it, right? Now, is this a normative claim or is this a descriptive claim, right? Because I think he's offering this, that this governs everybody, right? That this is just the way it is. And the principle of utility, which then becomes the moral theory, utilitarianism, recognizes this subjection and assumes it for the foundation of that system, right? So basically he says, okay, human nature runs whatever you think you do for your own reasons, really you're just doing them because of pain and pleasure. And really maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain, right? And we might as well take that basis, that hardwiring in our nature, you got to drink water, right? That's just one of the things you have to do. You got to sleep, right? Well, you have to obey pain and pleasure. That's the claim he's making. Now we're going to get a chance to disprove it, of course. But I just want to let the thought percolate. And then we will see the moral theory that builds upon that objective basis, you might say. So, a couple questions we have about it. So, the claim he's making, in essence, is that all human actions seek to maximize happiness by minimizing pain and or maximizing pleasure. All of them. Everything you have ever done, everything your parents have ever done, everything their grandparents, all the way back to Lucy Australopithecus. Everything we've done to maximize happiness. And how do we define happiness? Well, we just define happiness as any action that in sum increases pleasure over pain. Now you might ask yourself, well, not all actions affect both pain and pleasure, right? Sometimes I take a pain pill because I have a headache, and I do that just so the pain goes away. I don't get a sense of pleasure, right? Just the pain reduces. That still fits. Or, I might eat a candy bar, not because I'm hungry, right? Just because I want something tasty. And there's not I'm diminishing pain. I'm just increasing my happiness, right? But I think a lot of things in sum are a combination of pain and pleasure, right? But the claim is everything you've ever done was governed by maximize. There's an inner calculus going on in your head you didn't even know about. That behind all, you thought you had your free will and you were doing things for your own reasons, for your family, for your friends, but really you were doing it to maximize pleasure over pain in the long run. So, it's a big claim. It's a claim about you, everything you've ever done. Can we disprove it? Are all our actions governed by pain and pleasure, right? Can we think of something we've done or pursued that, when we look at the reasons behind that thing, really didn't maximize pleasure and minimize pain, right? So I'd like us to, this will be one of our options. Really have a go at this claim, right? Do we ever try to increase pain and or decrease pleasure, right? Like let's brainstorm times where you're lifting weights, right? Someone lifts weights and they can't, it hurts, right? You don't want to exercise, you're increasing your pain, and it doesn't seem like there's a corresponding increase in pleasure, right? Well, what would Jeremy Bentham say? Or what about a person who is into self-flagellation, right? Or self-mutilation, right? Why are they increasing their pain, seemingly decreasing their pleasure, right? What about someone who has self-destructive behavior, right? Aren't they increasing their pain and decreasing their pleasure? What other examples do we have where it seems like people are decreasing their pleasure and increasing their pain? What about going to college? Man, sometimes I teach this class on a Saturday morning, 8:30 to noon. Get that. It's actually a killer class. You all should take Saturday morning classes once life resumes because they are go-getters in that class. And you only wake up as the morning goes on. But isn't going to college on a Saturday morning decreasing your pleasure? When you know all your friends are out Friday night, and increasing your pain? Why the heck would you do that? Well, what would Jeremy Bentham say? He would say, even behind that seeming pain up front, probably there's a long-term reward, that would pay off. What other examples? What about somebody who, heaven forbid, commits suicide? Happens, doesn't it? These days it happens a lot, sadly. People are not getting their needs met. Something we'll talk more about. Doesn't this disprove Jeremy Bentham's claim that everything we do to increase in some pleasure over pain? Well, what's the rationale behind someone ending their own life? What would Jeremy Bentham say? These will be prompts we can respond to, but generally they would say, they're in so much pain that literally decreasing pain, aka ending their life, is preferable to living in that pain. Same with terminally ill patients, right? It's like, is it moral to, in some, decrease pain, increase pleasure, right? Lastly, and this is such a good example to illustrate this. What about those people who are just like Lothario playboys when they're young? They eat and drink and fornicate and all the bodily pleasures and drugs and partying, and maybe they have money and live sumptuously and ostentatiously, and then they happen. I mean, the first Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he was one such person. They walk away from a materially rich life, right? They give up constant parties and drinking and eating and just the lavishness of it all, and they go and live in a monastery or become a nun or a monk, and they give up that and they sleep on on a bare mat and they wear threadbare tunics. What the heck's going on there? Huh? Doesn't that disprove Jeremy Bentham's claim? Seems like they're taking their pleasure down to. But what about the ones who become abstinent? They give up sex. Isn't giving up sex, becoming chaste, like a direct refutation of refutation? Sorry, I can speak. Isn't that a direct refutation of everything we do is to increase pleasure over pain? Well, even here, you can see that a lot of these people who walk away from a life of partying and sleeping around and eating and drinking and drugs and alcohol and cigarettes, what they will inevitably tell you, they might say, well, I was motivated by the purity of a spiritual life, right? I want to be closer to God, my maker. But if I were calling bullshit, which I never would, of course, but hypothetically, I would say probably the thing that actually got those people to give those things up and renounce that and seemingly limit their material sensational pleasure is because after a certain point, those pleasures become a vice, a chokehold, a pain, right? Like anyone who's ever had any addiction, right? Whether it's cigarettes or alcohol or soda pop or pornography, I mean, anything, right? You know that these things, like, they become a pain, like a burden. And so that people, even people who give them up, according to Jeremy Bentham, right? We're just viewing it through his lens. Even those people really are trying to, in some, reduce pain and increase pleasure. Does that make sense? Hopefully. I can't really get any feedback, but hopefully that makes sense. I will be interested to see what examples you guys come up with. And finally, hopefully, I think this is a really strong claim. I'd be interested if someone does come up with exception to it or counterexample. And why does he say every attempt to disprove it will only confirm it? Because what would you have to do? You would have to go do something that in some increased pain and decreased pleasure. And I could give you literally, I'd say, all right, your assignment this week, the rest of the week is to go do one thing that in some decreases pleasure, increases pain, right? You go like, what, hit your head against a wall? Someone's like, why are you doing it? Oh, I'm doing it to prove my professor wrong, right? It's like, well, okay, so it's a more nuanced pain, pleasure, finessing, but you're still doing, you're still in some trying to prove a point, which will make you feel better. And you're not going to hit yourself so hard that you really hurt yourself, just hard enough to prove a point that causing pain, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea is that whenever you do something to try to disprove it, or maybe you try to act not driven by pain and pleasure, right? I've tried this myself, and about as close as I can come is the desire to know something, the desire for knowledge. I have a rabid, like it's unhealthy almost, desire to know things. And often I will pursue something even to the point that it hurts me bad. Like, just, it's unwanted knowledge, about like corruption and darkness and horrible things and your friends being pieces of trash and like all sorts of stuff. But still, I just got to know, and I pursue it. But in some, I don't think it actually increases my pleasure over pain all the time, right? I mean, maybe the pain of the unknown. But I really, behind all of those things that you think, you have a certain motivation for, like, do you not see pain, pleasure playing out in the background? So I'll be real interested. Hopefully this makes sense. Lastly, I just wanted to point out several of the descriptive claims I've offered to the class so far, and maybe people can play around and see how they relate to each other. Again, I've offered to you these ideas as claims on human nature. Not good or bad, just true and false. This is the way people act. Everyone acts in ways they believe to be in their self-interest, whether they're smart self-interest or dumb self-interest, right? All human actions fall into the three categories of desirables: things inherently desirable and instrumentally desirable, and things that are not inherently desirable, but only instrumentally desirable. And all human actions seek to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. I would urge you to see how each of these, how do we determine what's in our self-interest? Well, whatever action that is, it falls into one of the categories of desirables. And how do we understand those categories of desirables? Well, based on like the pain and pleasure, either delayed gratification, a little pain up front, working out, exercising, eating a salad, doing your homework, gratification in the long run, assignments are in on time, you're not throwing your money away, getting bad grades, wasting, et cetera, et cetera. So just want to throw that out there. Next, we will look at, last thing. So one of the prompts for Flipgrid today will be, assuming I've made my point clear that it does seem like everything we do is governed by pain and pleasure, wouldn't it be preferable to maximize pleasure over pain, right, in your life? That, like, if we really are hardwired to try to, like, increase pleasure over pain, decrease pain, increase pleasure, wouldn't the ideal life be a life where you and some of us, like, for me, I'm an adrenaline junkie, so I need, like, a lot of conflict, a lot of, like, a lot of activity. Some people have very gentle, tranquil dispositions. They want a lot of calm and peace and low excitement. I want a lot of excitement. I want a lot of, like, mayhem, not mayhem, but like drama, right? And so you can figure it out, right? But, like, wouldn't the ideal life be maximizing pleasure over pain, right? Well, yes, Mr. Doak. Sure, Mr. Doak. Absolutely, Mr. Doak. Well, okay, let's say I give you the opportunity not of leaving through the regular door, but behind the screen, there is a magical door that leads to basically like a pleasure machine. Now, what you're thinking, more like a matrix, right? Where if you enter the matrix, you get to design exactly what your life would be like. You want to like go on adventures, you want to run your own business, you want to have a family and 5 kids, you want to become a marathon runner, you want to discover something, invent something. If you had the choice of going through this magic door behind your screen at the end of class and like programming your life so that it would maximize happiness for you, which would be very individualized, right? Happiness for me would be very different than for you, I assume. Would you go through it? Would you take that door? And once you're in it, you don't know you're in a computer. So it would be real once you went in it. You could plan, I want to live 80 years. I want to have this kid. I want to go on 2 vacations. I want to have just enough trouble and drama in my life that, it feels real. I don't want to be too fake and too, vacation-y, right? Like, that's fine. That's fine. What I want to know is what % of you would take that door? We'll go through this magical door into a pleasure machine. If what we said is true, that everything we do is governed by maximizing pleasure over pain. And how many of you would go out the real door back to your own life, which you know is not going to be maximizing pleasure over pain? There's going to be a whole lot of suffering, whole lot of like let down expectations, you failing to do your best, but it is your life and you live it. So I'll be interested to see our responses. And again, more than what you answer, I want to know what your reasoning is. Given what we just talked about, why is it that you chose what you chose? Okay, see you soon. No.